Hello and welcome to Dinosaw number 35. So this is 7 curious, interesting things I saw last week. So let's crack on. So first one is P&G and Shopify getting into the scripted content business. So I'll start with P&G first. So P&G, obviously a big consumer brands company, Procter & Gamble. They make soap powders and all sorts of things. And you've seen this move from Apple and Netflix making their own content, obviously. This is slightly more left field, so this is coming from a huge consumer brand company. So the first one for P&G is basically a docudrama, I guess what they call a science factual, about families going to Mars. So think about Elon Musk trying to send families and colonize Mars. So they're making a drama essentially about all the relationships and the trials and tribulations about getting to Mars, being locked essentially for months and months and months in a spaceship. So that will actually be co-produced by Brian Grazer and Ron Howard. And also you've seen and it's Shopify. So Shopify are the creators essentially of online shops. So if you're probably trying to make a shop using WordPress, you might have used Shopify, for instance. So they're going into the scripted content business as well. So I think theirs is being aired on Discovery Channel, and theirs is all going to be about people who quit their jobs and try to make a new business. So it's very on brand for them, but obviously they've found a place for it on Discovery Channel. So starting to see lots of companies who are now creating scripted content and getting real airplay on them as well, rather than just sort of webisodes as such. Second one, just a bit of fun, well, as long as it goes right. This is a face mask launcher. So this is Alan Pan, who is a YouTuber who makes things. There's a few of these out there, some brilliant ones. And this is, he got fed up basically, he lives in California, and got fed up people who were not wearing face masks. So built this contraption, so uses a laser targeter on the bottom, compressed canister of gas there, and it basically fires this mask towards people. I think it is, well, whatever that is, kind of 4 meters or so. But essentially you've got little kind of weights that wrap around the back of the neck, as you can see. Just a bit of fun, but quite interesting. I'd love to see that at the entrances to supermarkets, etc. See where that goes. But you know, follow the video. Really interesting how we made it and tested it out, and also the public sort of reaction to it as well. Let's talk about Huawei as well. So this is in many different, you've probably heard about obviously lots of trying to get it banned in telecommunications equipment. However, Huawei do make telephones, and they are essentially the second biggest telephone manufacturer by brand in the world. I think only bested by a couple of percent. I think something like Samsung are 20%. I think Huawei are 17%. I think Apple are 14%. So you can see they're you know, relatively large, the second in the world. So they're obviously now also hitting a bit of a snag with Android being a Google-owned platform. Huawei phones use Android for their operating system. So there is a potential on the horizon for an American company to be told they can't provide Android. They've been given a 90-day kind of stay of execution, so we say, to still use Android to try and find something. And I think that's being extended again. So it's kind of happening, kind of not. So what they've actually got is they've got a Harmony OS, which is their own operating system. They've used it in their smart TV before, but now they've unveiled at their developers conference last week, I think it was, some more details of actually the mobile version of it as well. So it's kind of interesting that they could just go, well, do you know what, we'll create our own operating system and we'll be free from any of these kind of limitations as well. So if you are a developer and you currently have Android and Apple development, then you might want to think about Harmony OS sometime soon. DARPA held a full week of dogfight trials. This is AI-based dogfight trials, and there's 2 interesting things about this. Well, there's a couple actually, but it was all on Zoom. So it would have been a conference, but they just put it all out on Zoom, so you could have logged in any time and had a look at it. There's a full, well, not absolutely full, but there's edited highlights on YouTube. However, so what this was all about was DARPA, who are essentially the defense research agency in America, looking for AIs that can actually take on humans in a dogfight. So they had lots of heats during the week. All sorts of companies entered, essentially using the same sort of system. So they just basically had to figure out how to have a dogfight in midair. Now, Heron, who won the heats, for instance, basically used a reinforcement learning algorithm. So pretty much it didn't know what it was doing at the beginning and just learnt and learnt and learnt and learnt, rather than a lot of the other ones which are using sort of set maneuvers and try to use AI to trim them either way. So sort of a gross simplification of what was happening, but broadly speaking, nobody really expected this one to win, but it did. So the Heron, who are a defence contractor anyway, so they do this for a living, so it wasn't a surprise. They got to then play with a real pilot, who you can see in the top corner. So the prize for winning this was to actually take on 5 dogfights with a real pilot, all those simulated, so there's a little sort of lack of reality for the pilot point of view. However, as you can probably see from the scores, the pilot lost 5-0. So that's interesting in its own right. The other thing I thought was quite interesting is in 2015, we sort of saw this coming, and there was an open letter from all research and sort of roboticists and scientists, basically saying we will sign a letter to say that we will not develop AIs that will target and kill humans. And yet here we are 5 years later, streaming it on YouTube, and quote unquote celebrating the success of an AI to potentially kill humans in the future. So that's a really curious one, how we've sort of maybe missed the human point of this. This is a killing machine, and yay. Anyway, have a look at that if you're interested. Broadband, and a great shout out to the UK as well on this one. So this is a team at UCL, so University College London, and the last couple of weeks have unveiled their research that they have achieved 178 million bits per second, basically, or megabits per second. So an average broadband speed in the UK is about 68. So this is 178 million. So it's quite big. So this was actually led by Dr. Lydia Galdino. Obviously, super cool name, so it's got the word Dino in it. However, the really interesting thing about this one is they achieved it using fibre optic cables, and the standard fibre optic cables we currently have laid in the UK. So this is what's interesting. It doesn't need any more infrastructure. It was really all about transmitting the fibre optic signals using a higher bandwidth or a higher frequency of light, and therefore using lots of different compression to make sure that it could be transmitted and decompressed in real time. So the numbers behind this are really quite interesting. Yes, it's super fast. It's actually twice as fast as anything currently deployed in the world. So that's kind of cool. And basically, if you try to upgrade or lay 1 kilometre of fibre optic cable in the UK, it's about £450,000 per kilometre. So it's a huge investment. Now, if you've already got the fibre optic cable laid, all you really need is one of these boosters, these sort of fibre optic boosters laid between 40 and 100 kilometres. So they could be super far apart, and by the way, they only cost £16,000. So it's really interesting that all we maybe need to do is put these kind of repeater amplifiers every 40 to 100 kilometres, and that might give us all 17.8 million or 178 million bits per second. So that'd be amazing. And by the way, just another number is you can download the entire Netflix library in less than a second at that speed. So it gives you an idea about how great data could be in the future. So we're looking at 5G, and this would be amazing. So this one, another slightly weird one. So this is quantum stealth. So you'll be surprised when you look around this thing. Oh look, there was a thing hidden behind this stealth material all the time. So this is really interesting. So this has been going for a few years, but they've recently just got the patent. So there's some great videos, really long videos actually, about how it works. And it's really, really simple. If you've ever had one of those rulers when you were a kid that had a lot of dinosaurs, lenticular dinosaurs, and as you move them, the dinosaur animated. Those things are called lenticulars, and all they really are is a piece of plastic with lots of sort of scored lines on it that act as lenses to bend the light. Now, what this is doing is just using sort of 2 bits of that back to back with some water in between, just to make sure it's light can transmit through it. And that was only because they didn't really want to let on to the manufacturer of these big sheets what they were doing. So they could have said, well, let's manufacture them without the water in between, but they just didn't want to do that before they got the patent. However, what's going on here is you bend this thing, and then what you can do is you can tune the 2 sets of lights, the backwards and forward sheet, so that it basically starts to move the light away from the center. And you can tune that as well. If you want a sniper to think that you're to the left of where you are, you just stand behind one of these sheets, poke a hole in the middle of this, put your gun through that and shoot somebody. So you can hide entire aeroplanes behind this, or whatever you want to do. So that's kind of neat. Will this ever be coming to an urban scenario near you? Will this be hiding kind of carbuncles and eyesores or all that sort of stuff. But just really interesting. It's a little bit like that thing from the movies, or the, you know, all of that sort of weird stuff you've seen. The Harry Potter cloak, for instance, it's all in there. So basically, have a look at this. It's super simple, and essentially it's using something you've had as on a ruler since you were a kid, and yet it's been used for really interesting use. So innovation doesn't need to be that far from what we already have. And last but not least, this is a really good example of that. So, you know, innovation does not have to be technological, and it doesn't have to be complicated. So this was a study over the last 3 years in Botswana, and they were trying to figure out how to protect herds of cattle. So they used control groups. So they had cattle, normal cattle, they had cattle with X's on their bottoms, and they had cattle with I's on their bottoms. And obviously it looks like some sort of weird big creature. Now over the 3 years, I think they had a 15%, which is broadly speaking the normal mortality rate for the no eye cattle, and I think they had something like 5% or 10% for the crosses, and something like, well, they had 0. So they had none of the cows with eyes on their bums were attacked by lions and tigers. So it's really interesting how if you just paint eyes on the back of a cow, you can innovate around their safety, whereas before there were sort of, you know, trying gates and people with guns and all sorts of things and tags, yet you just need to basically paint eyes on the back of a cow. So there you go, just really interesting. Don't need to be too tech and too innovative to innovate. So there you go. And with that, we're done for this week's Dinosaw. So I will see you next week, and thank you very much.